Welcome back to Switch to Linux. Well, today we want to come back to DistroWars, looking at PopOS versus Linux Mint. Two Ubuntu-based distributions which have both done a lot of fabulous things behind the scenes. Now, these are not your fly-by-nighters. It's basically Ubuntu with a different theme or a couple applications installed. These are distributions who have taken Ubuntu, as good as it is, and made some type of modifications for some type of purposes, and then given us a community around them by which to excel in their operating systems. And which one of these should you use? I would say that there's going to be a lot of factors here. From the get-go, just throwing all my cards on the table, if you follow my channel, I use Linux Mint Cinnamon in most of my production stuff. It is absolutely hands down my favorite Linux distribution, and I love the fact that they have a life beyond Ubuntu should it come to that plan in place that I don't think Pop has. Which is a valid argument with some of the criticisms of Ubuntu, which some people look at what Ubuntu is doing and are deeply concerned, and some people say, hey, this is great, it helps everything work better. Which way is the best way to go? And these are, I think, more of up to a philosophical debate, a philosophical discussion. So we don't want to address that. But what I do want to do is I want to do just a little bit about talking about what's different and what's the same between these two distributions. And then we're going to have a little bit of a look at them. Now, we might spend a little bit less time in the distribution themselves and a little bit more time on their websites today, simply because I want to show you guys that these are not just skinned Ubuntu's. Some people look at that as an option. So first I'm going to look at PopOS's website. Now, we need to understand PopOS didn't just come from just having its own distribution. It was actually created to streamline work with the System76 company, which has some, to my understanding, some excellent Linux computers. So you can order a Linux computer from them out of the box. The default is they run PopOS. However, you can actually ask them to put another Linux distribution on the system as well. So PopOS is based on Ubuntu, and it runs a more closer to a vanilla GNOME with a modern flat material theme. And some people just look at that and say, well, it's just Ubuntu with vanilla GNOME. Well, it's really not. They've done a lot of things under the hood to really improve upon some of the things, particularly adding some things back in that Ubuntu has taken out, like 32-bit repositories by default so you can do gaming better. Now, I'm not a gamer, but I understand enough about this to know that some of the more modern versions of Ubuntu have a little bit harder time running some games because some of the 32-bit libraries, while are available, are not pre-installed. Well, PopOS makes it, I believe those are actually pre-installed. Again, I'm not a gamer, so I haven't set these up very frequently. However, I will tell you this. I actually do have a few video games I do like to play, and not a lot of them. And one of them was a Steam-based game that I could not get working well. Which one is it? I think I could not get that working well under Linux Mint. So I actually have a hard drive which dual boots Linux Mint and PopOS. Go figure, right? Because Steam works way better with PopOS, but Wine works better with Mint, or is it vice versa? I can't even remember. I need to put into one of them to play Wine games and one of them to play Steam games. For whatever reason, how things work. And even the Linux Mint, I had to do a lot more steps to get it game ready than PopOS. Although people who do play video games on Linux will tell you, half of the people will tell me PopOS is the best, half of the people will tell me Linux Mint is the best. So I don't really know because I'm not a huge gamer. But one of the things that PopOS has done is added a lot of those functions in. The other thing that they have done is the Intel management engine, which has caused some people some concern. PopOS is, to my knowledge, I could be wrong, but to my knowledge is the only distribution that handles that out of the box. They've actually gone through and done this. They've added firmware support into their system, so the firmware drivers can be automatically updated in the background. I'm not a huge fan of background updates, but that is certainly something that is there. And I'm guessing you can probably turn that off automatically, do it manually, but I don't know for sure. We do have a 1910 based on the more rolling Ubuntu, which isn't really rolling. It's like the incremental distribution changes, or you have an LTS. So when you are going to download PopOS, you have the option to grab the Intel AMD or to grab an NVIDIA version. So if you are running a computer with NVIDIA, you want to download this guy. It's going to work better with NVIDIA out of the box versus AMD Intel. You grab that one there. All right. So you do have the options between the Ubuntu point releases or the Ubuntu LTS, NVIDIA or non-NVIDIA. Now, the question people always ask them, isn't it just an Ubuntu with a theme? They actually have a post on their website to address this. So it's built from Ubuntu repositories, and you have, like we just said, you have either the 6-month releases or the LTS. This is the common question: is it just a reskinned Ubuntu? And it is built with vibrant covers, they say, but to say it's a reskinned Ubuntu brushes over the features and the quality of life improvements that the Pop developers work diligently to create. For an in-depth look at the manpower that goes into it, have a look at the roadmap documentation this week in Pop and Pop Planet. Below, you will find a general list of improvements to make PopOS stand out. So, again, some of the things that they're talking about, you can either grab the NVIDIA or the non-NVIDIA. The privacy, Pop does not have the data collection type stuff that was put into Ubuntu in recent years. Although they will say, if you read through this, it will do a temporary probing of the system for the purpose of checking which devices might need booted. Now, PopOS we're going to go back to Ubuntu PopOS versus Linux Mint here. They actually give you like a recovery partition, just like your Windows system does and an Apple system does. And you also have an OEM install, which is something Linux Mint does not have. So an OEM install is when your installation process, you don't set up any of your user account until you boot into the system. So the reason you do this is it makes it very easy if you are selling a computer for somebody, maybe you're working in IT and you're converting people over to Linux. The OEM install is excellent because you can install the system, shut it down, and then when your client first boots up the system, then all the account creation, geolocation, all that kind of stuff is configured at that point. Definitely a better structure because Linux Mint assumes that you're downloading it to install yourself. PopOS assumes that you are installing this for somebody else because it's built for a Linux computer company that sells real hardware. You can do a refresh install, a custom install, clean install. There are several desktop support items inside of here. They have chosen some better default applications. We're going to look at those. They do have some extra tools that are third party, making it easy to enable Linux gaming, which I think Ubuntu's making a little bit more hard, but you can still make it work. There's some custom shortcuts, faster EFI booting, Power Daemon, Firmware Manager is a new tool. Let's see, a multi-USB flasher. That's a feature I use in Linux Mint a lot. Do not disturb. That's been added to GNOME, so we'll not worry about that one. And just a few other little odds and ends. So PopOS is quite a bit different. Now, on to Linux Mint. Linux Mint's job is to have the best, most streamlined computer experience for somebody switching to Linux. We have the 19.3 presently, which is the Ubuntu-based version based on the 18.04 LTS, and we also have a Linux Mint Debian edition, which is based on Debian. And so here, if you do not like Ubuntu, but you still want a very good-to-use system, these two distributions are becoming so close to one another, it's very difficult to tell which is which. In fact, what's hilarious is I believe that Linux Mint Debian Edition actually has a newer version of LibreOffice. But you can actually come down here. You can grab a 32 and 64-bit for now, although that's probably going to go away in the next version because the next version of the Ubuntu LTS has dropped 32-bit support. We do have Cinnamon, Mate, and XFCE, giving you a variety of desktop options, albeit they all look fairly the same. Linux Mint Debian Edition only has the Cinnamon version right now. Linux Mint has done a lot. They are like PopOS. They are completely privacy-centric. They do not collect statistics of how many people are installing it. They basically say we don't care. There is nothing in there about tracking or anything else like that, although their new versions do have a system report where if you choose to, for diagnosis, there is an easy button to send system information, but it's an entirely manual process to when you are getting help for some issue. All right. Now, the other thing is Linux Mint does not like snap packages because of the proprietary base and distribution system. So they have stripped snap packages out. They have replaced that with Flatpaks instead, which has a few more options to get them from. The unfortunate thing is they are so integrated into the system that you cannot remove the Flatpak support or it will kill the system. But in all fairness, if you try and remove snap from Ubuntu, it does much the same in the modern iterations. Okay, so that is our two distributions. So with that, what we're going to do is let's have a look at these guys. And since we are looking at PopOS first, let's go ahead and boot on into Pop. All right, so here we have landed on the login screen for PopOS. So it's not the most glorious thing in the history of the world, but it is definitely functional. Just click on your username there and enter your password, and you will find yourself on your desktop. So here we are unleashing our potential with PopOS. So you can see it's just a basic, basic GNOME desktop. We do have some folder support, so that's actually good. I love me using my desktops, although the folder icon in the background is pretty ugly, but hey, that's easy enough if you change your desktop background. Let's have a look at what other desktop backgrounds they ship us with PopOS. We got this guy here. Look at that guy. All right, let's see. Go with that one there. So this is an older version of GNOME. I can tell because it's giving the option to use the login screen. Let's see. Let's try this one here. All right, so we'll just go with one of these, or let's do this one here. Let's go ahead and set this one. All right. So there we are. We got a nice new desktop background there. So now we can actually see what our folders are. All right, so inside of here, let's have a look at what we have. Most of what we're going to see here is going to be fairly similar. Actually, let's go back into the details here. So we are running GNOME 3.34. Definitely not old, but it's certainly not the newest version. I could spot that from how you select your wallpapers there. Now, this is where we have added a new tool down here for firmware. So any firmware that you have that might need updates, you have the option inside of firmware. That's a new tool that you will not find in other versions of GNOME. We do have, they also, I believe, have, I can't remember where this one is. I forgot to look for where it is. But they do have a theming option in here as well. Is it? Okay, there we go. So we have under our appearances. So this is something people have asked for, that either a light theme or a dark theme without having to install tweak tools in order to do. So that is another feature that you will find inside of PopOS. As far as applications we have out of the box, it is fairly streamlined down. We have calculator, calendar, contacts, files, web browser, Geary. We have a terminal, settings. We have a shop, LibreOffice, system tools. Here's your basic tools there. And let's see. And under utilities, there's a USB flasher, so that's a nice utility. As far as their store, they do have their own custom pop store, which a lot of people do really like. You can go, the basic default. This is what is installed, so any updates will appear on this list over here. The system will give you promptings for any system updates, and you can come down here and pick out the various things that you might want to install. All right, so if I wanted to install Thunderbird, I can go ahead and install it there. I did forget to double check. I can't remember if PopOS likes snaps by default. So, hey, it does not have any snaps installed by default, so that's another plus for me. As far as Flatpak support, I do not remember. These are a couple little things I forgot to look up specifically. But the store is nice. It's easy. It's a modern store. It's a custom store. Here's your repositories. We can check updates. You can do important security updates, recommended updates, or unsupported updates. Any extra sources will appear over here. So we have the PopOS items here. So they're giving us the Ubuntu, curated Ubuntus from their own System 76 sections, and also their proprietary repos there as well. So that's what we have inside of our system. So there's PopOS. Your biggest disadvantage is if you're unfamiliar with how the GNOME desktop works and you're not necessarily a huge fan of wanting to learn something new, it is going to be a little bit of a culture shock getting used to how it works. But I will say that after spending the time, if you are going to use GNOME, definitely take the time to learn how to use it. When I force myself to do that, I very much understand why it works and how to work it well. It just, like I said, doesn't jive with my specific workflow, so I actually prefer to use other desktops itself. But from a standpoint of somebody who has used a lot of the different desktop environments, it is good. I'm not going to sit here and say it sucks. Although I do hate Nautilus. It is probably my least favorite, window manager. But nevertheless, it is a very good system out of the box. This one here is going to be very smooth, very stable. Now, I will give you this brief caveat. When I installed this today, this is actually the third time I installed it, there was an update that kept bricking the system. And that's a little bit of a concern. Maybe it was a temporary thing. Maybe it was the fact on a virtual machine. I'm not sure what it is, but I first ran the updates in the terminal, which usually never breaks, but it seemed to freeze. And then I ran it through the GUI. It also seemed to freeze. I ended up fixing it by going into booting as a recovery kernel and then running our corrections on our D package, updating from there, and then it actually seemed to work. That's actually something we didn't do, though. Let's go back up into the settings before we leave. Well, let's just go into the terminal. Let's see what our kernel happens to be. So we're running 5.3 kernel, and I did run all of the updates before the show today. All right, so there is PopOS. Let's come on back into Linux Mint next. All right, so here we are on Linux Mint. Let me enter my super secret password. I do like the login screen for Mint quite a bit better. Also, FarronOS, thank you for the brief update. Yes, Linux Mint does now have an OEM install. When you first boot the live CD for Linux Mint, then there's a series of options. That's actually something I didn't mention on the download. A single download, it has the installation for AMD Intel and an option for the NVIDIA, and it does have the OEM. Thank you for that correction. I did forget about that. That is a new feature in Linux Mint. Also, Linux Mint Live Key. If you are running Linux Mint, keep a copy of the Live Key laying around on USB because they do now have resources on that to fix a system if your computer fails to boot. The Live Key for Linux Mint can actually help you fix your system as well. All right, so once we've landed here, your first time booting, you will have a nice welcome. PopOS, you do get a very similar thing to this where it will walk you through some of these steps as well. We have documentation, help, contribute, and I'll go ahead and turn this option off so I don't see that. I have already run my updates. I do like that we have an always present little notification down here if the system is up to date or not. So we do actually have that function there as well. And inside of here, we also have the ability to change our Linux kernel directly from the installer. So we are running, you can see we are running the same Linux kernel, 5.3. And you actually can go through and select different kernels in the event you're running hardware, where some people were having issues with the 5.3 kernel on their hardware. So you could easily roll back to something. You may not want to roll back to an end of life, but 4.15 is an LTS supported for a long, long time. I think that's actually what I'm running on my main system. So 5.3 is giving you some problems. You could actually roll back your kernel automatically here. And if your updates are going to appear over here, and you'll be able to see what they are and select them and deselect them quite a bit easier than you can inside of PopOS. Now, like I said, I like the more traditional, more Windowsy-like layout. It's just a matter of personal preference, and after a lot of experimenting around with different desktop environments, I actually find that this system is way more efficient. However, I still have to set it up in more of a traditional sense where I'm going to see everything that's open down. I want to see the giant task list filling up the bar. There's no reason to have this big bar here if it remains empty, because all of the applications are closed like this. And so for me, I like the more traditional layout, although the more modern UI is a little bit better. So I just modify this to behave as the older type of system. The applications that we have in default here, we have under our accessories, a lot of the similar accessories you'll get on a Windows system. We have a calculator, maps, disk. Hey, I'm an author, man. I love the calculator or the character map. I mean, that's just the good stuff. So anyway, and I'm a geek. I actually do use it. So we have Redshift. We have USB stick writers, which is good. We have drawing applications. We have Firefox, HexChat, Thunderbird, Transmission. We do have the full LibreOffice suite there, Celluloid, Rhythm Box. So definitely more things. Some people might suggest that this is potentially even bloatware, but at the same token, it's not a lot of systems. And these two, I didn't pull up the system monitor in the other one, but they do run. They run at about equivalent speeds. They run at about equivalent memory usage. Now, one of the major advantages in Linux Mint, if you happen to want to have more controls over your colors and design, is the theming is definitely better in Linux Mint. You have basically what you're doing here is choosing between, you know, a light theme and a dark theme on a variety of different colors. So you can choose your more skeuomorphic type looks with your X series, or your more material design with your Y series across various colors in a light or a dark background setting. So you have a lot of those options there as well. If you want to do something else, you can very easily add themes over here. We're not going to update the cache, but push this button. You're going to see a listing of new themes and settings. You do have a lot more system control options inside of Linux Mint. Most of the other tools and options inside this control panel are also all going to be inside of PopOS. It's just going to be, these ones here, it's just organized a little bit differently. PopOS does support those firmware tools, which Linux Mint does not specifically have those. All right, the installing software. I do like the software manager in Linux Mint better. It will, first time you load it, it does take a little bit longer to boot up. So here, I just like it. It's not as beautiful and flashy, but I do find it very easy, very functional. We also have, like PopOS, there's no snap support, but this does have Flatpak support. If you click this button here, you're going to be able to see what all of the flat packs are that are on the system. Also, if we search for something like, for example, GIMP, you'll see that there's going to be two options to install for GIMP. Well, two major options that are the actual application. One of these is actually going to be a Flatpak, which is going to be the latest version, and one of these is actually going to be from the repository. This one is an older version from the repository, and there is a Flatpak version around here somewhere as well. Usually it's a lot easier to spot. Where'd it go? It might be on the screen and I just don't see it too. Half of you guys are sitting there going, it's right there, stupid, it's right there. They moved it to the very bottom. I'm not sure why it's on the very bottom, but this is actually going to be the latest version of GIMP 2.10 from a Flatpak. So we get that with a lot of different applications. I guess GIMP's a bad example to show you just because of the sheer number of plugins available. Kdenlive, I think, should be a little bit easier to make my point here. So we have one of these is from the Flatpak. We have one of these is from the repository. So it makes it very easy to see which one you happen to be installing. Overall, the theme systems are going to work very well. Whether you have GTK or Qt applications, they're going to look very good, very consistent. And with this, you do have we have a lot more choices for backgrounds as well. If you are into changing things, moving your backgrounds around, you do have a lot of various choices inside of there, so you can do that. And I like the design, the layout, the UI of Cinnamon a lot better than GNOME. So I think overall, I personally would choose to go with your Linux Mint more than I would go with the PopOS. But there's very good, very valid reasons to use either one of them. I'm going to actually say it's kind of a tie. Which one wins is going to be subjective based upon your own personal desires, your own personal opinions, which one you would like to do or not like to do. So that's kind of my thought and my idea. Let me know your thought. Which one do you think is better, PopOS or Linux Mint? Let me know in the comments down below. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to the channel if you've not already done so. Leave us a like, leave us some comments. And if you want to help support the channel, switchtolinux.com/support is a great place to go. Thanks for watching. I hope that you enjoy switching to Linux.